Dead men tell no tales. Unless they wrote a diary, I guess, or they recorded a video blog entry or something like that. But the traditional wisdom is that they tell no tales. Also, this is the title of a cooperative game that I discovered, played, and picked up at Origins Game for 2015. Dead Men Tell No Tales. It's a game about pirates, but with an interesting twist. Here's the story. It's a cooperative game. The players take on the role of pirates. They approached a vessel that they wanted to loot. They weakened it with powerful cannonades, as it should be, as conventional wisdom about pirates is. Unfortunately, that also set the enemy vessel on fire. So now the enemy vessel is burning, but the pirates, being brave as they are jumping on it, nevertheless, to loot it, only to discover that the enemy ship is inhabited by undead pirates. So you have skeleton crew members, animated skeletons going around the ship trying to kill you, zombie guards that are guarding their treasures, and I'm like, what? A burning ship full of zombies? I want to go in. Of course, how could I resist the call of such an interesting situation? It's just the most obvious thing. I'm going to jump in and see what I can do before the ship blows up. And if you're interested in knowing more about this crazy situation, all you need to do is to keep watching. And in a second I will show you how the game works and plays. Each player in this game controls a pirate. Each pirate is represented by a card indicating the identity of the pirate and the special ability of the character. Each pirate has a different ability. You place the card of your pirate by this dial here, which indicates the level of fatigue. Each pirate starts at 0. As you perform actions moving around the ship, fighting, losing fights, you will gain fatigue, and you use this dial to record that. Now, the rooms in which you will travel will have a level of fire. The higher the fire, the hotter the room, and the harder it is for you to be in there. If you are too fatigued, you won't be able to enter certain rooms. Once your dial indicating the level of fatigue reaches or goes past this dice symbol, you will not be able to enter rooms with the corresponding level of fire or more. So if your fatigue is here, you will not be able to enter a room with a level of fire of 4 or 3. You can still enter rooms with less than 4. And there are game effects that will lower your fatigue and other game effects that will give you fatigue. Each player has a set of action tokens. Most characters have 5. There's a card that has 6. During your turn, you will take actions, and for each action, you sacrifice an action token. So you flip it to keep track of how many actions you still have and how many you've used already. Each character also starts with an equipment card. These cards come from a small deck of cards, and during the game you will be able, if you choose to do so, to swap the card that you have with other cards that are available on the table, that cards that haven't been assigned at the beginning of the game. Or also you can swap those cards with cards belonging to other players. There's a card that does not belong to any player in particular. This plays on the table, and this is where you place the treasures that you managed to loot from the ship and take out of the ship. And finally you have the ship itself, the protagonist of the game, the place that you will explore, where you will look for treasures, where you will fight undead pirates, and also the ship that you are trying to prevent from exploding before you're done with your looting. There is an explosion track here. Every time that the explosion happens on the ship, you move this marker up by 1. If the marker reaches the end of the explosion track, the entire ship explodes and you lose the game. This is one of the many ways in which you may lose the game. This is the starting tile. You always put this on the table at the beginning of the game. The starting tile has several dice slots. You will place dice on them, matching the color of the slot. You roll the dice at the beginning of the game to determine the initial value. The higher the starting value, the tougher things are going to be for you. Then you have a stack of tiles representing the various rooms that the players will add to the ship as they're exploring the ship, but the more rooms are out, the more things get dangerous, because the more possible explosions may happen. Therefore, the larger the ship that you're dealing with is, the more likely it is that explosions will occur and that you will lose the game. So you need to move fast, because at the beginning of each turn, each player will flip a tile face up and will add it to the board. The tiles have walls, but also have doors. You can place the new tile anywhere you want, as long as you're connecting it to the ship and as long as all of the doors are matching other doors. For example, this would not be a legal placement because these doors are matching, but here there is a non-matching side, so this would be a legal placement, and also this would be a legal placement. The first turn, each player will actually place 2 tiles, and starting from following turns, each player will only add 1. So during a turn, a player first adds 2 or 1 new tile, resolves the tiles, setting it up. Then the player spends action tokens to perform actions. These action tokens are refreshed at the end of the turn, and then each player will draw a card from this deck indicating bad stuff that happens on the ship. You repeat like this until either the players win or they miserably lose the game. When you're adding a new tile to the board, you grab a die of the corresponding color and you simply set it to the value indicated there. I have a red die with a 2. I place a red die with a 2 there. There's also an icon there indicating that there is a powder keg there, which may explode later. But for the time being, I don't have to worry about it too much, a little bit. Here there is a bag with tokens representing stuff that the players may encounter on the board. After you place the tile and you place the die there, you draw a tile from this bag here and you add it to the board. The tile may represent a trapdoor, in which case you simply place the trapdoor on the tile you just discovered, and you also add one of these markers here that indicate deck hands. These deck hands are little pests that will come out of the woodwork during the game, and the more are on the board, the harder it is for you to move around. They're not too dangerous per se, but if you ever need to add a new deck hand to the board and there aren't enough available, then you lose the game. That's another way of losing the game. Similar to many other cooperative games, when there's a certain level of quote-unquote corruption, if too much is on the board, then you lose the game. Something like that you have in Defenders of the Realm, for example. Back to us. Trapdoors may be added to the board. You may find one of these double-sided tokens here. They represent a skeleton crew member on one side and an item on the other side. This is the item that the enemy drops if you do manage to defeat them. The skeleton crew members also will move around the board during the game. And then you have more dangerous enemies, the guards. These never move, and they're guarding treasures. These are the treasures that the pirates are trying to find, take from the guards, and then bring back to their little boat where they will collect the treasures. You win the game if you manage to find and bring outside enough treasures before the game is over, before any of the losing conditions apply. And the number of treasures that you need to find depends on the level of difficulty that you have chosen to play. But these are the guards that will guard the treasures. So when you add a new tile, you may get a guard, you may get a skeleton crew, you may get a trapdoor. A lot of different things are possible, but these are the 3 things actually. More things are possible because of the effects that the items that you collect may determine. So you add to the ship, making sure that the geography of the ship is consistent, is not breaking any rules. Then, as I said, your pirate will perform actions. You do not have to perform the maximum amount of actions that you have. You do not have to use all of your action tokens. And actually, if you save some, you can transfer them to the next player. The next player will then return them to you, but there is that flexibility there that you do not have in all cooperative games. In many cases, however, you will want to spend all of your actions because you desperately need to perform actions. Possible actions. You may walk, pretty self-explanatory. You simply move from one room to another. Ta-da! But remember, you cannot move in rooms that have a level of fire that has been prohibited by your level of fatigue. When you move to a room, if you move to a room that has a higher level of fire than the one in which you are, you gain a level of fatigue which is equal to the difference between the room in which you are and the room that you just entered. I'm moving from a room level 2 to a room level 4, and then I receive 2 points of fatigue. So if you're moving to a room with an equal or lower level of fire, at least you're not gaining fatigue. Another action that you may choose to take is to run. To run allows you to move by 2 rooms, 1 and 2. You're gaining all of the fatigue that you would normally gain for moving through the 2 rooms, plus you also receive 2 points of fatigue just because you took the run action. So there is some extra fatigue involved, but at least you're moving by 2 rooms, spending a single action token, not 2. That is what it would take if you were to take the walk action twice. You may lower the fire. You may lower the level of fire of the room in which you are by 1 for a single action, so from a 3 to a 2. You may choose to eliminate a deckhand in the room in which you are or in an adjacent one. Now, deckhands, when there's only 1 in a room, there's no game effect. When there are 2, then you can still move through the room, but you cannot pick up tokens. And if there are 3, no pirates can enter that room. So you need to use the eliminate deckhand action to remove 1 or 2 in any case. There's a card that can remove 2 deckhands with a single action, and then you can move into that room. You can pick up a token if you defeated an enemy earlier. The enemy is flipped to the token side, and then you can pick up a token. If it is a treasure that was dropped by the skeleton crew, then you simply place the token by your board and you can use the effect. For example, the grog can reduce your fatigue. The cutlass is very important because it gives you a combat benefit, things like that. Also, remember, it is treasures that you're looking for. So if you defeated a guard, the guard dropped the treasure, then you use the action of picking up a token to take the treasure and put it on your board. You can choose to rest. Your only action is simply to lower your level of fatigue by 2. Or you can increase the battle strength. This is very important. You're preparing for battle, so you're using an action simply to get a bonus here. 1 level of preparation for each action that you spend that way. And you can save the bonus from turn to turn, but once you use it, then you cannot use part of your bonus. You're using all of your bonus in a single combat, and so you go down to 0 again. Finally, the last action that you can choose to take is to swap your item card with another one. For example, I don't need the bucket right now. I'm gonna swap it with the pistol or with the dagger or with something else. But that's one of the possibilities. Now, there are bad guys on the board, as we said earlier. There can be guards, there can be skeleton crew members. The point is that every time that you enter a room that has one of the bad guys, you have to fight. It doesn't cost an action, but it happens immediately, which means you cannot enter a room and then start building up your bonus. You have to fight with what you have at that time, which can be tricky because sometimes the crew members will move in the room in which you are, and if you're not ready, well, too bad, you're not ready. When combat happens, it is immediate. The second you share a room with an enemy, you roll this die, the combat die, a regular d6, and you add any bonus that you may have from your items, from the bonus track. You simply roll the die, add the bonus or bonuses that you may have, and if you manage to equal or exceed the combat value of the monster, then you simply defeat the monster. And now there is a token that is available for you. If you fail, different things may happen. If you fail against a guard, the guard never moves, so then you simply can fight again or retreat for no action. If you fight against a skeleton and you lose, then you roll a die, and that determines the next action. Also, when you lose a fight, you add fatigue, as you gain an amount of fatigue points equal to the difference between the enemy strength and the battle strength. If my total battle strength against this guy was 4 and the guy has 8, then I have to gain 4 points of fatigue for my pirate. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff that can give you fatigue. If you get all the way here, then your pirate just dies of exhaustion. And so you're constantly gaining fatigue and taking actions to reduce it. It goes up and down all the time. Another thing about fatigue and movement is that when you grab a treasure, you have it on your board and you're trying to bring that back to the outside of the ship, there are limitations. Now you cannot take all the actions that normally you would. You're only able to walk or to rest, or you can swap an item card. You're carrying this very heavy item, that's why you cannot do all the things that you were able to. You are moving slower, and also you are getting more exhausted. When you are looting, that is when you're carrying a treasure, you're gaining fatigue not just based on the difference between the room in which you are and the room in which you enter. You simply gain the number of fatigue points determined by the room in which you enter. From 4 to 1, if I weren't carrying anything, I wouldn't gain any fatigue because I'm going to a room that has less fire. But when I am carrying a treasure, then I simply gain a point of fatigue. If I'm here and I moved here, I would gain 4 points of fatigue. 4 more points of fatigue. Trust me, I would need to rest before I was able to drag this heavy treasure here outside. Luckily enough, when you manage to exit the ship, at least you recover fatigue. You can take a breath, you can catch a breath, and then you recover half of your fatigue by rounded up. Other things, this is for what you're doing. Go in, fight, to take actions to try to keep things at bay, prevent things from exploding, and try to steal stuff from the undead. But then after you're done performing actions, the environment does bad stuff to you. This is when you draw a card from this deck and you resolve the effect. There may be a yellow die, a red die, or both, in which case you simply look for the dice on the board with the corresponding color and number and increase those dice by 1 pip. For example, this would be pretty unfortunate because there are a lot of yellow 4 dice, which I all increase to 5, increased by 1 pip. If a room reaches a level of 6, the room explodes. When a room explodes, the explosion spreads to the adjacent room through any open doors, so it also increases the level of the fire by 1 in all adjacent rooms. It destroys things that are in there. For example, it will kill a pirate, and then you turn the room like this to indicate that now the room is impassable. So actually some areas of the ship may end up being sealed off to you because of rooms that explode, so try to prevent that from happening. Other explosions may be determined when the level of fire in a room that has a powder keg, reaches the level of the powder keg. So in this case there's a 3, the fire in there is a 3, boom, there's an explosion there. It is a minor explosion, not as tragic as a room explosion, but it goes through the door that the powder keg is adjacent to and increases the level of fire in the adjacent room through the door by 1. Also, it counts as an explosion here on the explosion track, and then you move the die on the powder keg, just as a reminder that that powder keg cannot explode again in case you lower the level of fire of that room. Other negative effects, at the bottom of the card you may have skeleton crew members that move. They try to reach the closest pirates. This one, well, it's always paired with a 5. Remember, if you have 5s and you move them up by 1, they go to 6. The question mark is just says check if to see if there is an explosion. But if you then have three of these cards in your discard pile, at that point you reshuffle the discard pile into the deck. You shuffle the deck and you simply start with a new deck. So there will always be some explosions out there. This means that trapdoor areas that have deck hands in them will spawn other deck hands. You will add a deck hand in all rooms that are adjacent to trapdoor rooms that do not have a trapdoor room, that do not have a trapdoor themselves, and that have less deck hands than the one that you're spawning. Here I have 2, here there is 0, there are no trapdoors, I add 1. Here there's 2 versus 1, but there's a trapdoor, so I add nothing. Here there's a trapdoor, 0, no trapdoor. Add, and add. And remember, the more deckhand are out there, the worse it is. There's another icon here that indicates that you must add a deckhand in each room that has a trapdoor, like that. So the first thing that came to mind to me as I was playing the game is Flashpoint with zombies and pirates. That's a pretty good deal. Flashpoint is a game that came out a couple of years ago. The theme was firefighting. So people were nice, were trying to rescue other people. It had more of a, I don't know, realistic theme, of course. That was a big element in the game. Realism flies off the window or walks the plank in this game because it is an over-the-top romp in which you're a pirate, and that's really cool. And there are zombies, and there are powder kegs exploding right and left, and deckhands coming out and trying to overwhelm you. It's a crazy situation, similar overall because of the fire and the fire level to Flashpoint, but with more of an adventure feel to it, which I actually like very much. It doesn't feel like you're a professional. It feels like you're trying to get the job of rescuing people done. Hey, you're a pirate, so you're going for the thrill. You're a sort of like adrenaline junkie going into this crazy situation. The situation, the theme is much more interesting to me than what you have in Flashpoint. Also, in Flashpoint, the map is set at the beginning of the game. Sure, stuff can blow up, but you do not have the dungeon crawl feel that you have here. This basically is a dungeon crawl in a dungeon that is going to explode. Sure, differently from dungeon crawls, you do not just discover the parts of the dungeon that you're exploring. New tiles come out of the deck every turn, not necessarily when you're taking the explore action or whatever it is in other games that you do to increase the size of the map. But the fact that the dungeon grows automatically is not necessarily a good thing, because the more tiles are out there, the more dangerous the situation is, the more places can explode, and that, of course, is one of the many ways in which you can lose the game. So I definitely like both the dungeon aspect of it and the timer feel, the countdown clock feel that you have as the dungeon grows before your very eyes, and as things start going south quickly, fast, and tragically. You do have the sense of this exponentially growing mess that you have to deal with, which is very important because it does create tension, and it gives the story a certain momentum. It is not just about repeating the same actions zealously turn after turn. It is about figuring out ways of dealing with increasingly tougher odds, because the deckhands will just come out and explosions will happen, the map will change, and it will get harder to go where you need to go. The sense of increasing threat, the sense of growing disaster is very much there, which to me is key. Because of course, the longer you play a game, the tired you may get. So the risk of being bored if the progression is too linear is there, but is not going to be a problem here because the challenge increases, and to me this is a really good thing. Lot of options, lots of challenges, just so many actions, and in good designed ways, you always have the sense that you're just a couple of actions short from the ones that you would need to feel comfortable. And this is very important fine tuning that you need to have in a good design. Too many actions or enough actions, then you do not have enough tension. Not enough actions, you see that the maximum, the desirable number of actions is too far from the ones that you have, then you do not have a challenge, then you just give up. I think that this game here does a good job of presenting you with a challenge, which is really hard, but not unreasonably so. You do get the sense that even if you were completely destroyed and in a certain game, maybe there could have been ways in which, if you had acted differently, it would have stood a better chance. Of course, there is a luck factor, the initial die roll alone. If you roll just fives, things are gonna be tough. Sure, potentially, then you may not get the card that will make that explode too early, but it may just so happen. However, there is so much luck from so many different directions, from the way in which you draw the tiles, the die rolls, the initial placement of the dice. That somehow paradoxically, this is one of those situations in which things even out each other a little bit. Sure, you may get very unlucky when you're rolling the dice at the beginning, but then maybe the wrong card will not hit for a while. You may get unlucky with a combat, but then you get lucky with the placement of the tiles or the effects that, especially when it comes to the deckhands, do not chain off in such a way that will benefit the board enormously. But because so many things happen, probably at some point it will happen that you will get a chain of negative effects that becomes particularly nasty. It's almost a game in which, since there is quite a bit of luck, almost everything will happen almost every time. A lot of good things, a lot of bad things will be handed to you by Lady Fortune, so it is not a matter of just a lucky game or an unlucky game, even though such extremes are perfectly possible, but a game with a tsunami of stuff happening to you in an order that is not predictable, and then it is a matter of managing the resources and selecting the correct chain of actions that will pay off. And in that sense, even though this is a game that has a lot of luck, the result is rewarding. It does feel that the game definitely comes down to how you manage risks and budget actions, as opposed to just being completely decided by luck. Combat, super simple, super basic. This is not a war game or not a combat game in any sense. It really is about managing risks of spending actions in such a way that you will get a reasonable bonus. It really is about this. You have a limited number of actions, but I like the flexibility of being able to lend actions to other players, so there can be discussion in there. Well, look, I'm not doing much this turn, but at least I'll be able to give you some actions so that you that are in a more critical situation will be able to do something else. So I like how the budgeting of the actions also has this interactive aspect. It's not just I have my thing, you have my thing. The team really can and should work as a team. The game definitely develops a story because of the sense of natural progression in the sequence of disasters that you encounter, because of the crazy stuff that happens, because of the very strong thematic feel that you have thanks to the mechanics that do mirror the story that is being told, but also because of the art and the quality of the components, which is pretty high. Definitely a night catcher here, and the components are all nice looking, which is a plus. Pretty sturdy. I think this is a game that will last from the point of view of the physical components. So I'm really happy that I acquired this game, and then I added it to my collection because I find it fun, challenging. Oh gosh, I have played the game several times, including by myself late at night, thanks to the solo ability of the game. And I still have not won the game. I got close to winning the game once. at the simplest level, at the basic level. And when you consider that you can play the game at several levels of difficulties, and once you master the hardest level, then there are variants that you can introduce to make the game even tougher. I think this is a game that you'll be able to play for quite a while before you find how somehow some strange algorithm will allow you to win every game or most of the games. I think this is a game that is challenging as is and can be kept challenging by simply tweaking the design in very simple ways that are recommended in the rulebook. Dead Men Tell No Tales. So who doesn't love zombies and pirates and exploding ships? I don't know who that weird person may be, but definitely that is not me. I love all of the above, and I love the fact that this game puts them all together in a game that is challenging, fun to play, full of options, and definitely creates a strong narrative, which to me is always a great plus in any game design.